Welcome to this presentation of the Waltham Historical Society and Historic New England. This is on the development of Warrendale. And I'd like to begin by recognizing a few people. Wayne McCarthy, the president of the Waltham Historical Society, who has put a lot of effort into this program this evening. And I'd also like to recognize Mort Isaacson. Mort is the chairman of the Waltham Historical Commission and also an active member of the Historical Society. And he's done a lot of work on researching the history of Warrendale. Marie Daly is a member of the Waltham Historical Commission and also an active member of the Historical Society. She's done a lot of research. And also Rachel Malley, another member of the Waltham Historical Commission, has done a lot of research on the history of Warrendale. Okay, so this presentation is entitled Waltham's Leave It to Beaverville, the Development of Warrendale. And I think that requires a little bit of an explanation. Leave It to Beaver was it was a television show. It was on from 1957 to 1963. And it featured two young boys, a boy named Theodore Cleaver, Beaver Cleaver, and his brother Wally and his parents and all of their nice neighbors and the teacher. And they lived in a little town called Mayfield, a fictional town. Mayfield was this wonderful suburban development of a lot of nice people and nice houses, a really nice community. And several years back, the Boston Globe did a story, and they mentioned Warrendale, and they referred to it as Leave It to Beaverville. I've also, over the years in my history of Waltham class at Waltham High School, I've had students interview parents and grandparents about old Waltham. And I've had grandparents and parents compare Warrendale to something out of a Leave It to Beaver episode. So that's where the title comes from. And the first picture here, you can see the fictional town of Mayfield on the left. And that would be on the screen when the show began, Leave It to Beaver. The history of Warrendale begins with this man here, Governor John Winthrop. He was the first governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony. And in 1631, he led an expedition into what is today Waltham, exploring the land to the west of the nearest settlement, which was Watertown. And he went right along here. This is what is today Main Street. And back then it was just an Indian path. It's perfectly level there. It's later maps will refer to it as Waltham Plain. But he led a small expedition of a handful of men, and they went right along here. And the first place they came to was right here, Beaver Brook. And that is the first place in Waltham that will be given a name. Governor Winthrop he wrote in his journal that there were a lot of beavers here building dams, so he called it Beaver Brook. So that is the first place in Waltham to have a name. The other interesting thing, when you look at this map, this is 1738, and we've got the boundaries of Warrendale. So you've got Main Street and his Beaver Brook running roughly where the railroad tracks are today. And right over here, this is Warren Street. So in 1738, Warren Street existed. And right here, this is Beaver Street, the intersection of Beaver and Warren. And this is Warren Street going up towards Belmont, towards Francis Food Market. And if you look at Waltham, it's divided into lots of land. That was referred to as the Great Dividends. And people in Watertown were given land to graze their cows in Waltham. So Waltham starts out as a cow grazing community. So every one of those lots belonged to a settler in East Watertown. Remember, Waltham is part of Watertown at the time, and that's where they would graze their animals. Oh, I want to go back 1 minute because I want to point out something here. If you look right here, you'll see the name Garfield. And Edward Garfield is most likely the first person to settle in Waltham. And that would have been in the 1600s. So you'll see that name here. And that street, his house was roughly where Hager Lane and Warren Street intersect. And one other interesting thing here, if you look right here, you'll see something called Ives Hill, 140 feet high. Now, that's the intersection of Warren Street and Beale Road. And if you just think for a minute, if you're on Warren Street and you turn down Beale Road, when you first turn onto Beale Road, it goes up a little bit. Madison Road goes up a little bit. And then behind Madison Road, you'd have Windsor Terrace, which is a hill. And behind that, you'd have Barber Road, which is a hill. And then it drops down to Beale Road. I've never seen it referred to Ives Hill anywhere except on this particular map. If you go to Grove Hill Cemetery, that is the it was referred to years ago as the old burying ground before it was called the Grove Hill Cemetery. And you'll see a lot of people named Gearfield or Garfield buried there, buried in the cemetery. Um, and those are all descendants of the Garfield family that was the first settler in Waltham. Okay, a couple of maps here. So the map on the left, it shows Watertown. And Watertown used to be a huge place. So this is Watertown today. And here's Waltham today. Waltham was another section of Watertown. Here's Weston. Weston was part of Watertown. Part of Lincoln was part of Watertown. And today, part of Belmont was part of Watertown. And gradually, Weston broke off. Waltham broke off in 1738. So eventually, all these places became their own towns. And today, Watertown is the smallest of all of them. There's Watertown right there. And if you look at the map on the right, you'll see where Warrendale is. So here's what is today Watertown. Here's Belmont up here. And Warrendale would go from the Watertown line to Beaver Brook to Main Street. So that's Warrendale right there, right on the edge of Watertown. The main road in colonial New England, it was called the Great Country Road or the Boston Post Road. It's Main Street in Waltham today. And because of that, a lot of famous people would have come down the Great Country Road and actually gone through the edge of what is today Warrendale, the southern boundary of Warrendale. When George Washington, two different times, came down the Great Country Road, in 1775, he would have come right down Main Street, right along the southern boundary of Watertown, on his way to Cambridge to take command of the Patriot Army. And in 1789, he had been elected president, and he made a tour of all of the different states, 12 of the 13 states at the time, just as a way to unify the country. And he was coming into Massachusetts. He was in Weston, and 700 men from the Waltham Cavalry escorted him through Waltham, right down Main Street, with crowds of people welcoming him as he rode through Waltham. So he would have come right through what is today the southern boundary of Warrendale. And of course, right just south of Warrendale, Governor Christopher Gore builds his mansion. It was the finest mansion in New England at the time. It was sometimes referred to as the Monticello of the North. And he would have had a steady stream of well-known visitors. People like Daniel Webster spent a lot of time at Gore Place. President Monroe visited Gore Place. So all of those people would have traveled down the Great Country Road. Okay, we're jumping here. If you look down in the lower right-hand corner, it's 1831. So let's point out a few things here. Right down here, here's the Charles River. You see it? And it says Waltham Factory. Now that's the Waltham Bleachery and Dye Works. That would be where Shaw's is today. If you go right up here, this is Willow Street. And if you follow Willow, this is Grove right here. Now Grove used to curve and connect with Main Street. It no longer does. And right here, this is Main Street. And here's Beaver Brook. So this is Warrendale right here. Here's Warren Street. Here's Hager Lane. And every one of these dots represents a house. So you can see in 1831, you've got a house here. This is the Coolidge House right up here. That's at the corner of Main and Beaver Street. Way over here, this is the Arrigo Farm, right on the Waltham line that has been conserved by the city of Waltham. It's now being used as a tree farm. And the house, which was built about 1837, is being restored. So you see a handful of houses along Main Street, and you see a school right here. I believe the school was actually a little further to the west. And then you see Beaver Brook. Okay, now we jump to 1854. And you'll notice now we see some names. So let's take a look once again. So here's Main Street and here's Linden Street way down here. So this would be where Petco is today. And you can see the railroad is in. See the railroad right along here. So you're coming down Main Street. This would be Rose Hill Way. You see that driveway there? That's Rose Hill Way. And you'll see a name there that says Thomas Page. And we'll get back to him in a minute. And you go a little further down, you see the name J.S. Walcott. And he doesn't just own a little house here, he owns all the land going back. All of these people own huge tracts of land. Well, take a look at the name, and now look at Beaver Brook. And on the brook used to be a mill, J.S. Walcott's Mill. And no one knows was it a grist mill? Was it a sawmill? No one really knows. But there was a mill right on Beaver Brook where the current is right there. And now we get down to Warren Street. And right here, you see the Warren White House. It's still standing today. And that is, it's right opposite Hager Lane. It's set back. It's an older yellow house built. It's the style of architecture is called Italianate. And right over here, you see the name Clark. Now, I mentioned a minute ago, this was called the Coolidge House right here. I'll be showing you a picture of that. And this is the Arrigo Farm. And you'll see the name Thomas Barnes. So Barnes, originally that was the Warren farm. Barnes married into the Warren family. Eventually it was owned by the Arrigos and then owned by the city of Waltham. And that is the oldest continually farmed land within Route 128. So that's been farmed continuously since the 1630s. Some of you might remember this house. This is the Coolidge House. This is a house that was at the corner of Warren Street and Beaver Street. And it was torn down maybe, I'm taking a guess, 15 years ago. All those houses, there used to be an ice cream stand there, which we'll look at in a minute. They were all torn down, and this was torn down, Dean Dairy was torn down, and houses were built there. If you take a look at this for a minute, you see this plaque. The plaque used to say on it, the Bennett Tavern, 1725. And I cannot find any reference to anyone named Bennett ever owning this, but there was a plaque on it that someone put there at some point saying the Bennett Tavern. Okay, now we're going down Warren Street and we're coming towards the Belmont line down to where Francis Food Market is. And you might recognize this if you look through the trees. That's the farm building that's now being restored way over here. This is 5 acres of land that's all been conserved right here. And this is the old barn. The barn is still standing today right there. Okay, back to Main Street. A minute ago, I mentioned Rose Hill Way. So if you go down Rose Hill Way, just a little ways, we're going to come to a road called Manor Road, M-A-N-O-R. Why is it Manor Road? The mansion was there. And here it is, Rose Hill, the residence of Thomas Page. An impressive house for back then. Okay, now we're looking at 1875. Now let's take a look at Rose Hill Way. Here it is, but a new name is there. Right here, it says J.R. Farnham, John Robbins Farnham has bought that. He purchases the estate in 1865. And now you see another name, Bowker. And you see a couple of houses. Bowker owns 66 acres of land. He owned most of Warrendale. He was a marble dealer from Boston. And here's Warren Street. and it's cut off before you can get further down Warren Street. So there's Warrendale in 1875. Once again, just a handful of houses here. And here's Mr. Farnham, John Robbins Farnham. He comes to Waltham in 1865. He ends up establishing a business in 1873, Davis and Farnham Foundry. If you're on Main Street and you go down Willow Street going towards Shaw's, you'll come to a Chinese food restaurant on the right called Three Fortunes. If you look right opposite that, you will see a little street called Foundry Ave. There's the foundry. The foundry manufactured gas pipes and manhole covers. In effect, it was a steel mill. So Mr. Farnham was enormously successful with this. The company will stay in business until 1924. It goes bankrupt in that year. It's purchased by a different person. They run it for a few years. In 1930, there's a fire. The buildings are destroyed, and eventually Raytheon occupies part of that site. This is Mr. Farnham. Okay, Mr. Farnham's hobby was raising horses. On the right, you will see his famous horse, Commonwealth, a racing horse. And he builds, it's called Central Park. So let's take a look at it. He builds a horse racing track. Waltham High School also played their football games here. So where is this? Okay, this is Grove Street right here. Grove Street, as you know, goes right by Lowell Field. This is Lafayette Street right here. That house is still standing. Now we go down this big smokestack. That's the Waltham Bleachery. So he builds a horse racing track. It had a grandstand. It had stables. The circus used to perform there. And that was right way over here. There's Gore Place. If you look way over in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Gore Place. This picture jumps up a little bit. This is 1911, but I wanted you to see. All right, so here's the Charles, here's the Bleachery, this where Shaw's is today. That building is still standing. That's at the corner of River Street and Seance Street. This would be BJ's today, right here. But here's the horse racing track built by Mr. Farnham, who lived in Warrendale. And this would be right here. This is Main Street. This is Gore Street, right here. Here's the Gore Place. And here's Warren Street. So in 1911, 112, 113 years ago, you look at Warrendale, there's still not a whole lot there. Okay, in 1884, let's take a look at Warrendale again. So here's Main Street. Here's the Grove Hill Cemetery, the old burying ground. And you'll see a new name here. Mrs. W.E. Bright, William Ellery Bright. Most likely Ellery Road is named after her middle name, and maybe her maiden name, Ellery. And this is Rose Hill Way. And now you'll look, Rose Hill Castle, it's being referred to as. And the name, John Robbins Farnham. And then Bright again owns land over here. And you can't see it, but a little further off this map would be the Bulker land. And here's Jonathan B. Bright. And he was a carpet dealer in Waltham. And his house was on the south side of Main Street, but his family owned land on the north side of Main Street also, which is today Warrendale. Okay, now we're up to 1886. So right here, here's Main Street. Here's Warren Street. Let's look at the landowners. Farnham, the Rose Hill Castle, all in here. Here's the Bright Estate. And Edwin Bulker, the marble dealer, 66 acres of land here. Look at that chunk of land. And he's building houses for his family. See them here? We'll be talking about them in a minute. And the interesting thing here is way over here, Somerville owns 35 acres of land in Warrendale. That roughly corresponds to where the Warrendale School is, uh, Chaffee Ave, part of Charlotte Road, Bruce Road, and most likely they were using it as a sand and gravel pit, and they were digging it out, and they would take the sand and gravel and put it on railroad cars and ship it right into Somerville. Okay, we're up to 1892 here. And if you look at this, this is the first subdivision in Warrendale. And it's called the Lincoln Park Company. And this is way up on the Belmont line. This is by the Arrigo farm. So here's Warren Street, right in the Belmont Watertown line. Here's Bowker Street, not Bowker Road, Bowker Street. Here's Wilton Street. Here's Waverly Street. They're all those streets are still there. And part of the old farm is divided into little house lots, and you get the first subdivision in Warrendale in 1892. Okay, this map right here, we're up to 1908. So here's Main Street, here's Warren Street, here's Hager Lane, here's that subdivision I just mentioned in 1892, way up here. But if you look here, you see the beginning of a street in Warrendale. And it says Walnut Street, Forest Street, Woodbine Street. None of those, none of those streets were ever built. And the rest of Warrendale in 1908, still fairly empty. Okay, now we're up to the end of World War I. So, Main Street. Here's the Farnham estate right here. Mrs. Bright's land. Look at the Bowker land, 66 acres, just about, with a handful of buildings that he's built for his kids. Here's the land owned by Somerville, abuts the railroad. And way over here, these little streets that were never built, right in there. Okay, so we mentioned Bowker. There are 3 Bowker houses still remaining. So the house at the top, if you're on Bowker Road, this is a wonderful house. It's owned by the McGowan family. And it was owned by Emma Bowker. You're actually looking, that faces Bowker Road today. That's actually the back of the house. The front of the house is on the other side, facing the backyard. But years ago, there used to be a circular drive that went off Main Street into where the backyard is, and that was the front of the house. Beautifully preserved, wonderful marble fireplaces in it, stained glass windows, just a really wonderful piece of architecture. Right down here, this you might recognize this, the St. Jude Rectory. And that was another Bowker house, the Francis Bowker house. And this one's a little bit obscure. This is over on Brigham Road, and it's the George Bowker house. And George Bowker was farming in Warrendale at the time. So he was not in the marble business, he was a farmer. So those are the 3 Bowker houses still remaining in Waltham. And we jump to 1923. And look at the left. Revere man buys Bowker property for development. June 13th, 1923. So Bowker sells out and the land is going to be developed. At the same time, in American history, that's Henry Ford on the right. The car on the left is a Model A. This is not Waltham, by the way. But Henry Ford has been mass producing Model Ts. In 1922, he is selling a brand new Model T for under $300. How does that tie into Waltham? Well, Ford has put America on wheels. What Ford has done is he has made it possible for people who work in Boston and Cambridge and Somerville and Everett to live in places like Waltham and commute to work. So in the 1920s, you see a lot of development, a lot of suburban development all over the country. And right here in Massachusetts, you see development in Warrendale and also in Cedarwood at the other end of Main Street, which the old Sibley Farm is developed in 1928. So what happens? Okay, they start laying out the streets. So these are the first streets in Warrendale. And you see Bowker Road, Brigham Road, Arbor Road, Bruce Road. So this is the earliest subdivision. And way over here, the streets that were never built. And this is the subdivision going up towards Francis Food Market, way up here. Okay, so now we're up to 1936. This is a great picture. We're looking here, you might recognize it. This is the corner today of Main Street and Warren Street. This building is still standing today. It's the paint store, and there's a pizza restaurant in there. This would be where John Brewer's is, right over here. So here's Main Street, and now you're going down Warren Street. This house is still standing today. Okay, so what does this look like today? Well, Wayne McCarthy went out and got a great picture here. That's what we're looking at. So let me go back. There it is. Look at the building on the left. There it is again. Look at this building right here. Oops. This building right here. And here it is. And you go a little further down Warren Street, and to the right, that would be Watertown. And I want you to notice that the telephone poles are on the Watertown side of the street. And well, let me go back again. So here it is. You're going down and this is the store today. So let me go back. So right along here, look at the curve. And here's the curve of the road. Okay, and you go a little further up. Now you're looking at the Watertown side. See the telephone poles? That's the Watertown side. And they're building the street. They're putting in the sidewalks. And I want you to take a look at this house right here. There it is. See it? So here we are. Go back. See the curve in the road? Some of these houses have changed. But there it is today. We go a little bit further down Warren Street. Remember, this is 1936, so we're right at the height of the Great Depression. Here's the Watertown side. Look at this house right here. There it is. Okay, so we're going down Warren Street. And this picture is a little bit hard to decipher. If you look carefully at this, here's the telephone pole on the other side. So that's the water. We're looking towards Watertown. My best guess on this is Hager Road, Hager Lane. This is Warren Street, and you're standing in Warrendale here. And you'll notice there's a sign over here, and you can't make it out, but down below right here, it says buy now and save. So it's probably something for the land that they're selling, but who knows? The rest of the sign's not really visible. Okay, another picture that's a little bit kind of mysterious, but I think this is Hager Lane again. So here we are coming down Warren Street, going up towards Watertown. See, there's the telephone poles. They're on the Watertown side. So we know we're looking down towards Main Street here. And now we're getting down towards Beaver Street. And this house is still standing today. There's going to be a wall that's going to be put right here. This is the Coolidge Tavern, right at the corner of Warren and Beaver Street. And there's the wall that's being built. Take a look at the wall. That's still there today. Here's the Coolidge Tavern, right there. Or the Coolidge House, I should say, not the Coolidge Tavern. And there's the wall today. And that's where the Coolidge House would be, right there. Okay, let's go to the other end of Main Street in Warrendale. In 1936, this bridge is built, and this was part of the New Deal. It was built under the Works Progress Administration. Before, it just went right over the railroad tracks that was underneath that, but the bridge was put in so to avoid the traffic all stopping every time a train went through. This is 1939, and a real tragedy in Warrendale. There were three boys. They were junior high school age. They were young kids, and they were playing in the sand pits in Warrendale. Now, remember, I mentioned that Somerville was excavating sand and gravel and shipping it into Somerville. Later on, another company bought the land. It was called the Clematis Brook Sand and Gravel Company. So it was being mined in effect. And roughly at the end of Bruce Road, there was a giant 25-foot high pile of dirt. And these boys were building a cave. And it was the room they put inside the cave, inside this mound, was so big they even had a little fire going to light it up. And three boys were inside, one boy was outside, and the whole thing caved in, and the three boys were killed in 1939. And this was the survivor. We're in 2024, so if he were alive today, he would be in his late 90s. So he was a survivor out of the boys who were digging the cave. This is not Warrendale, but we're after World War II. In 1947, a New Yorker named William Levitt comes up with an idea to mass produce houses. Henry Ford was mass producing cars. He would mass produce houses. World War II had just ended. 16.5 million soldiers were returning, young men. Many of them were going to get married and raise families, and they needed housing. So Mr. Levitt bought a potato farm on Long Island, and he built 17,000 virtually identical houses, and he was selling them for about $8,000 a piece, and he sold out right away. And all over America, similar developments were built. So now we go to Waltham, and we see another development, and this is called the Windsor Park development. This is 1940, and this would be really the last section of Warrendale to be developed. And if you look at the streets here, you'll see Beaverville Road, Windsor Terrace, Madison Road, Barbara Road. So all of this is subdivided in 1940, but the houses aren't built until after the war ends. There was virtually no housing being built in America during the war. That was not a priority. So the war comes to an end and the houses start being built. So this is Windsor Terrace, right off of Beale Road. This is my house right here. And some of you might remember the Mirabile family. They were there from 1958 until very recently. Way over here, this is Bill and Betty Kasanjan's house right here on Windsor Terrace. This house over here, this is on Madison Road. This house is on Barbara Road way over here. So what you get is mass production of 5 and 6 room cape. And they were being sold for $6,000 when they were first built. And similar to Levittown, the houses were virtually identical. This is Beale Road at the foot of Windsor Terrace, looking down Beale Road. Okay, so let's take a look here. Barbara Road, Trinity Circle, right here. So you're coming up Barbara Road from Main Street, and this is Madison Road. And way over here, this is Beale Road. Here's Windsor Terrace. There's my house again right there. Here's Barbara Road. This is Cleveland Road. This is Beale Road down here, and right opposite that would be the Warrendale School. So similar to Levittown, you get a development, Windsor Park, of small Cape houses that are selling for $6,000 roughly a piece. Okay, so you've got the houses being built, you've got young veterans getting married, you have the baby boom, and we have to go back and we have to talk about schools. So we have to think of a neighborhood, it's more than houses. You need institutions that give it an identity. You need institutions that create a community. And any good neighborhood is going to have a neighborhood school. The first school in Warrendale is called the Warren School, the Samuel Warren School. It's still standing today. Today it's the American Legion Hall at the corner of Waverly Oaks Road in Beaver Street. It was built on land donated to the city by Colonial Warren. There she is in the upper right. Her mansion was a little further down on Beaver Street where the Girl Scout camp is today. He gave the land, and the school is named after her father, Samuel Warren, who was a paper manufacturer. His business was up in Maine. And this little tiny school very quickly filled up. You see all that development going on in Warrendale, and you've got the baby boom, all the baby boom kids. Take a look at the News Tribune cartoon of 1953, and the boy looking in the window, 1.5 million increase in school enrollment. That's over the whole country. And you've got all these kids coming along. So they needed a new school. So in 1947, the city of Waltham put aside $330,000 to build a state-of-the-art school. Imagine building a school for $330,000. You cannot buy there is nothing for sale in Warrendale. No house is selling for less than $600,000. And here is a whole school being built for $330,000. And they built the school, and then the school quickly fills up, and they put an addition on in 1953. So this is the addition that was put on. And I want you to take a look at the land here. Remember I said it was a sand and gravel pit, the Clematis Brook sand and gravel. Notice how it slopes down like it was dug out. And if you go over to Chaffee Ave on the other side, it also slopes down. So this was all being dug out by the city of Somerville and by the Clematis Brook Sand and Gravel Company later on. Few pictures of the Warrendale school. So you've got all these kids in Warrendale going to this school. There were no buses. Everyone walked to school. And this room right here, this was the kindergarten. And this is the kindergarten classroom here. Some of you who attended that, you'll remember the stage right up here. And there's a little bathroom off to the side here. But a really nice kindergarten kind of set off from the rest of the school. And here is the school, well designed, perfectly fit in with the landscape and with the neighborhood. 1960, grade 4. And right up here, there's Wayne McCarthy, the president of the Historical Society. So every year you'd have your class pictures taken. And this, I believe, is a 4th grade class. That's Miss Kearns right there, her classroom. But a lot of you who went to the Warrendale School, you'll probably fondly remember these classrooms. And right over here, here's the closets we used to put our jackets in, would hang them up on the hooks there. And downstairs, this was the kind of like an auditorium. They had school assemblies there. And on election day, this is where people would vote. It was down in the basement. The field day at the Fitzgerald School, at the Warrendale School. And it's called the Fitzgerald School. We had a superintendent of schools, James Fitzgerald, and it was renamed in the 1970s, the Fitzgerald School, but it's the Warrendale School / Fitzgerald School. And this teacher here, that's Mary Murphy, and that's her class on a field day. And one of the neat things in the school, it had an aquarium, and sometimes it was used as a terrarium built right into the wall. And I remember when I was a student there, one time a snake that was in there got out, and that was a big topic of conversation among us little kids, is where did the snake go? Okay, so you need more than houses to have a neighborhood. You need, you have your school, you have the Warrendale School, and we also had a neighborhood church, St. Jude Parish. It actually began in 1949, before the church was built. Mass used to be celebrated on Willow Street in the fire station, but on March 29th, 1952, St. Jude Church is dedicated. Uh, it was built on the Bowker property right there. And down here, this is the day it was dedicated. There were 1,000 people that went to the dedication of St. Jude Church. And the church was growing and the neighborhood was growing. So I believe it was 1964. School was built, St. Jude School, still standing today. And this is the legendary priest, Monsignor McCabe, Father McCabe, who was there in the 50s, the 60s, and into the early 70s, I believe. And the playground, Monsignor McCabe Playground, is named after him. Everyone loved Father McCabe. Okay, so what does Warrendale have? Warrendale has a school. Warrendale has a church. Warrendale had businesses. And over here, this is Dean Dairy. So this was at the corner of Warren Street and Beaver Street. It was an ice cream stand. They sold Christmas trees there uh, at Christmas time. We used to walk there because there weren't that many cars. So, I was just a little kid, and a bunch of us would all get together and we'd walk to Dean Dairy, crossing Beaver Street. It wasn't dangerous back then, and you get an ice cream. And there's one of the Dean Dairy trucks. And that would be in the 1960s. And this is Dean Dairy, probably late 70s, maybe the early 80s. And you'll notice if you look at the roof, there's a sleigh up there. See it? So they put that up there at Christmas time when they were selling Christmas trees. There's Dean Dairy. Take a look at the menu. And one of the interesting things, a sundae, a jumbo sundae, 60 cents. With nuts, 65 cents. But that land was too valuable for an ice cream stand. So eventually, I think it was the Howard family sold it, and it was divided and turned into houses, which is happening all over Waltham even today. Another business in Waltham was Howard Johnson's, and that's where John Brewer's is today. Now, this is not an exact picture of the Howard Johnson's that was in Waltham, but it's basically the same. They all look the same, but that started out as a Howard Johnson's. If any of you have a picture of the Howard Johnson's in Waltham, contact the Historical Society. Would love to get a picture of that for our collection. The Howard Johnson's menu, that was a chain store, a chain restaurant all over the country. And you'll notice just one price here. Fried scallops. What is it, $1.99, I think? Fried clams, 96 cents. Okay. So for a neighborhood, we've got our school, we've got our church, we've got a restaurant, we have an ice cream stand. We also had a playground, the Warrendale Playground. And this is Charlotte Road, right here. And once again, it was a sand and gravel pit. So you can see it's coming down like this. Whoops, let me go back one. And there used to be a water fountain right here. And that's Wayne McCarthy right here. And these are his siblings. And the baseball diamond was right just out of the picture, right over here. So the Warrendale Little League began in 1958, I believe it was. And it was only boys who played there for a long, long time, at least in the 60s and 70s. And eventually girls were playing there too. But one of the traditions was the opening day parade. And all the kids that played in the league, and there were major league teams, minor league teams, farm teams, they would meet at, back then it was Stop and Shop. Today it's Petco and CVS. And they would all be in uniform and they would on a Sunday march down Main Street to Brigham Road. They would march down Brigham Road. They would be led by fire engines and police cars. They would go to the playground. They would line up. They'd have the opening day ceremonies, and then they'd have a couple of ball games. Every kid, this was like one of the highlights of the year. Everyone looked forward to opening day. And every team would get their picture taken. So this is my team picture. And we used to have out here, there used to be a scoreboard, and it was green. It said Warrendale Little League. And you'll notice behind it, see that? There was a board, and kids would climb up there and they would put numbers. The numbers were in this box right here, and they would hang numbers every time a team scored a run. So you could look up there and see what the score was. And that's me right here, number 7. And there's my dad. He was the coach. He was the manager of the team on opening day right there. And notice how he's dressed. People remember the 60s, men, you know, on a Sunday, you put your jacket and tie on. And, you know, some of you followed football. Vince Lombardi coached in a suit. Tom Landry with the Cowboys always wore a jacket and a tie. You don't see that anymore. And this man here, this is Mr. Joyle. He was my father's friend. He was the assistant coach. Okay, so what do we have to create a neighborhood? We've got our school, we've got our church, we've got our stores, we've got our restaurants, we have our playground, we have our little league. But what about people? And I would have been remiss if I didn't include a picture of this man and his wife. This is Dr. Craig. And he lived in the house. It's still owned by the family at the corner of Beale Road and Main Street. And Dr. Craig was a legendary doctor. He was a great doctor. And most everyone in Warrendale and a lot of people in Waltham, he was their pediatrician. And that's his wife, Roseanne. They had a large family, a lot of kids there. And he was stationed out of the Waltham Hospital. And there he is on the left, National Hospital Week, 1978. And the neat thing about Dr. Craig is he made house calls. He would be going to people's houses when the kids were sick, taking care of them. Probably recognize this. This is the Arrigo farm that is now being restored. So that building was built, the land has been continually farmed since the 1630s. That's not the original house. That was built, I think it was 1837. And there's been some additions put on. And that's a fairly recent picture. That's Mr. Arrigo. It was, still used as a farm right through the 20th century. If you drive around Warrendale, you can still see some of the old houses. So this building is technically across the street, but right across the street from St. Jude's Church, it's the south side of Main Street. So it's actually Rangeley Acres, but you see a nice Queen Anne Victorian house. And this house here, this is on Rose Hill Way. And this is part of the old Farnham estate. This was the gardener's cottage for the Rose Hill estate, for the Rose Hill Castle, still standing. That was actually built before the Civil War. That's another building. The style of architecture it's called Italianate. And then when you go to roads, Bowker Road, Bruce Road, Ellery, Mayall, you see some of the older houses in Warrendale. Nice Dutch Colonial, that's on Beale Road. This is on Clements Road right here, kind of a craftsman bungalow style house. And then you get down towards Barber Road and Madison Road and Windsor Terrace and Beale Road. You get a lot of the Cape style houses. And this house right here, that's on Barber Road. This one is actually in Rangeley Acres, but right across the street from Warrendale. at Rangeley Road and Main Street. And this, I believe, is Wayne Avenue right over here. Okay, but what's going on in Warrendale today? And it's not just in Warrendale, it's all over Waltham and it's all over the country. Houses are being purchased by developers, and if they can get a house at a good price, they knock it down, and they're building these really large houses, so the character of the neighborhood is changing. Houses in Warrendale now are often priced at over $1 million. And remember, when they were first marketed, they were selling for about $6,000. So these houses that used to have these little capes, 6-room capes that would have 4, 5, 6 kids in them. Now you've got these massive houses with maybe 1 or 2 kids in them. So, change is a constant. It's something that's going to happen, but it is changing the character of the neighborhood. And this is a house on Beale Road that was recently bought by a developer and knocked down, and they're building a big house there right now. And this is kind of an interesting picture. So if you look, this is Charlotte Road, and right over here, a bungalow, that's probably 1925 to 1930. It was built, a small bungalow. And right here, there used to be a small house, and a developer bought it and put up a very, very large house here. And over here, you see another cape that's been added on with a room. So a lot of these little houses that were built in Warrendale, they've undergone a lot of renovation and change, and even being demolished and new houses built on the footprint. Okay, so we mentioned all these different institutions that help make Warrendale a really close-knit, desirable neighborhood. But there's something going on in America, not just in Waltham, but all over America. And it's that communities are in trouble. Communities, neighborhoods are no longer as cohesive as they used to be. And a few years back, a professor at Harvard, his name is Putnam, Robert Putnam, wrote a book called Bowling Alone. And his argument is that Americans are no longer joining clubs and organizations. They're no longer, that a lot of the institutions that were the glue that held the neighborhood together, neighborhood schools, neighborhood stores, neighborhood churches are in decline. And he said it's a kind of a dangerous trend going on. So you look at the subtitle of the book, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. So it is something that it's not unique to Warrendale, but we lost our little neighborhood school, and now we have a very large Warrendale school that was built, and St. Jude School is closed, and Dean Dairy is gone, and Howard Johnson's left, but we do still have a restaurant there. Warrendale Little League, it used to be going 7 days a week, and a couple of nights they have ball games down there, but the Warrendale Little League itself is gone. The old parade is no longer held. So a lot of those things that really made Warrendale such a desirable place are no longer in existence. Okay, and that concludes the program. And I do want to recognize Historic New England here at the end. Historic New England, they own the Lyman Estate. They've been a great partner for the city of Waltham. Every year I bring my students here on a field trip, and they're wonderful to my students. They have movie nights during the summer, and they sponsor programs like this on local history. So we thank you for watching. If any of you do have old pictures of Warrendale or old pictures of Waltham, and you'd like to preserve them, we can scan them here at the Historical Society and give them right back to you. So thank you for attending, and good evening.